Welcome to the Free Learning Podcast. My name is Dan.
And my name is Marlene.
So this is the second part of our interview with Chase and Aimee of Tight Loops. If you guys heard the first part, you're probably eagerly anticipating this one. And if you haven't, go listen to that one first before you start this one. This one, we talked to them about sort of their experiences first traveling on the road and how they sort of became filmmakers. They've both been very creative people. Chase was an illustrator, he was a skater, he got really into filmmaking through skating, and Aimee has always just had a camera. So we talked to them a lot more about the creative side of things, and also in this one we talked to them about the project that they're currently working, which there's still some things that have yet to be announced, but we are releasing what we are allowed to. So
We're not spilling any secrets.
we're not spilling any
No,
beans.
we're not going to get in trouble.
But there's probably a lot of stuff in here that you didn't know about. So you should check out this episode. It's another about roughly 90 minutes, and I think you'll enjoy it. We could have spoken with them for probably another 3 hours. And as a matter of fact, we did talk to them for an extra probably hour and a half after we stopped recording.
Yeah, it just wasn't recorded, yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in that last part that we didn't record were things that we were not allowed to share. So
Secrets.
yeah, you guys will find out probably in the near future. So here it is, second part of our episode with Chase and Aimee of Tight Loops.
I mean, nowadays, I wouldn't be surprised if like art schools or film schools would even have like dedicated classes for like to become a YouTuber, to be a content creator, right? To shoot videos of yourself or be like a run and gun, one person operation.
Yeah.
In that sense, I assume that wasn't available when you guys went because it's still too early.
No, yeah, it was. I mean, YouTube was around, but the like YouTuber idea and like Instagram was around,
right.
but like influencer, like that was not a thing.
Instagram was not around yet.
Really? Is that
No.
just
Instagram was
post-COVID?
more in the 2010s.
Yeah.
I left my first year of college and last year was 2007.
Yeah.
Instagram, I didn't get an Instagram until it came out and I was in North Carolina when it came out.
Yeah. Well,
You
I
could
just
only
think
get it on
the
iPhones
First iPhone
then.
was 2008. So how long was it? I feel like tail end of college.
Yeah,
or
maybe
like-
a couple years. I want to say 2010 or 11 because I remember we got our Instagram account in 2012, and when I went to go sign up in 2012, it says this email has already been used. I'm like, what? And I've forgotten that I had signed up for it like when I first heard about it and just never used it. So it was a couple years before that, long enough for me to sign up and forget
Yeah.
before 2012.
It's crazy.
So, in that sort of timeline though, like when did you guys decide, well, I guess there's a couple of things that happens from when you guys met, when you guys started dating, after school, and when did the traveling start and when did the filmmaking, photography while you're traveling aspect of your life begin and how did that happen?
I'm gonna let you take this.
No,
I have
go
to
ahead.
pee really bad. I'm gonna go pee. I'll be right
I'm
back.
on my arm. Okay. Let's see how much of this I can remember accurately.
I can
So
say
I
all
know-
the stuff that you didn't want to say in
Make
front of
up our whole
Chase.
history. I know, like 2015 is a pretty distinct year because of Journey On. So I had flown to San Francisco on my own before Chase and I were dating, before we had like started that whole thing. I went out there when I was living in North Carolina just to visit, thinking I'm probably gonna want to move to San Francisco. I have some friends that are there. But otherwise I had never been out west. Like I'd never driven cross country. I had driven
Oh, wow.
from Massachusetts to Chicago,
Yeah,
but
how
that was
far?
the farthest
Chicago
west
is
I
this
had
far.
been.
Wow.
It was a pretty big
That's
road
the
trip for me.
Midwest.
That was like
Yeah.
I
straight
don't know
out of
why
high
it's called the
school.
Midwest, but it's the Midwest.
Yeah, straight out of high school, jumped in my little '87 Plymouth Horizon and drove to Chicago and saw some bands play. And I thought that maybe I would go to college out there, but ended up going to Mass Art. But so that was my exposure to the West. I'd been to Florida, I'd been to North Carolina, but I hadn't really like pushed out that way. And when I met Chase, obviously we talked a lot about Montana and the West and his love of fly fishing. I had never fly fished before. I was a vegetarian. I'd been vegetarian for like probably 10 years at that point. Ended up being vegetarian for 12 years and then slowly transitioning into eating cheeseburgers, which is good because In-N-Out was in my future. I just didn't know it yet. But
yeah, you can't.
So,
it was eventually going to happen. You just got your body ready for it.
Yeah. But so Chase taught me how to fly fish pretty early on in our relationship, and I really took to it. Obviously, like, it was a little conflicting for me as a vegetarian that like I didn't want to eat these fish. Like, I didn't really know how I felt about fishing in general, but like the fly fishing perspective was really nice, and it was giving me a lot of like excuses to just like stand in a river and like take in my surroundings and interact with the natural world in a way that I had never done before. I grew up camping and hiking and doing a lot of outdoor things, but fly fishing was totally new to me. And that was really when, I mean, I was painting at the time and I was still taking pictures and doing photography stuff. Wasn't really shooting any digital. You were kind of like, maybe you should get into like the digital thing and start using a digital camera. And then you bought the Lumix, right? That was the first
GH3.
The GH3. And like, it just sort of like naturally started to happen. I don't know if it was like a particularly conscious, like, we're going to start filming us fishing.
Well, yeah. So, this is sort of important to note. And this goes to the like,
I don't know if we talked about how did fishing come into the picture in the first place. Like, since you didn't grow up in Montana necessarily, how did you get into fly fishing?
Well, I got into fly fishing through my family. I mean, Montanans and fly fishing is like Brazilians in soccer. Like I said, we came home every summer to Montana. And,
so when you came home, you were in Montana during all the summers.
And like that's like if you're a fly fisherman, like that is the place to be and the time to be there. It's like summer in Montana, So my uncles and cousins, my grandfather, whose home we're in now, all fly fished. It was kind of a matter of time before it reached me via osmosis, whether I wanted to or not. Like family summer activities always revolved around like rivers and lakes where like people can fish if they want to fish. And just out of a natural curiosity, I was kind of like, oh, what's that all about? And I just happened to be one of those people who like caught the bug instantly, like first time out like casting a rod or catching a fish, I was like, I want to do this every day. And that's not true for everybody. Some people can fish and like take it or leave it. Oh, that was fun, but there's lots of other fun things, like I'll play soccer tomorrow or whatever.
I'm also like not a big astrology person, but Chase is a Pisces.
I am a Pisces. Yeah.
My brother loves fishing. I enjoy it when I do it, but he's like you. He caught the bug and wants to do it all the time. Yeah, no, yeah. I don't have it like him.
So I was crazy into fishing all through my like young childhood. When I was, late teenager, like skateboarding really took over. Skateboarding and girls and whatever, took over. And then post college, I was completely blown out on art in general, which is just sort of like kind of a natural progression of like from when you're 6 years old being like, I'm going to go to art school, and then like following all the way through like a 4-year degree in art college. I was like completely jaded on that. I went into the film industry like directly out of college, worked in film and television for about a year and a half, and then I was like, I got to get out of here. Like I feel suffocated, I feel trapped. I don't like the industry. I don't like what I'm doing.
Like big city.
And you were like a production grunt?
Yeah, exactly. I basically like quit artistic practice cold turkey, and I went and I spent 5 years working construction, which is really when like Aimee and I met and started dating. I was a mason. I did bricklaying and historic brick repair on all these old mill buildings in New England. Anyway, whole other weird side chapter of my life. Learned to trade, surrounded myself with completely different people than I'd spent my entire life up to that point being around. But when I met Aimee,
that'll be in episode 2 of Luke's
podcast
with us.
Not when I met Aimee, because I met Aimee when I was in college. But when Aimee and I reconnected and started dating later, Aimee was like a real artist out in the world with her own creative practice, doing her own thing. independent of like the world I'd come from, where it's like you went to school for it and you don't, you know, it's like I couldn't visualize how to take what I was doing up until and through college, my sort of like self-centered artistic practice, following whatever creative whim I wanted to, only doing the things I enjoyed doing. And then the reality of like working in the film industry afterwards, where like, you know, for probably the first decade of your career, you're not going to have any say in what you're making, and you're working for other people. Yeah. And it honestly operates more like a construction site than whatever you envisioned, you know, making art professionally would be like. So, you know, that really had turned me off, and I'd gone this whole other direction. And then I met Aimee, who was an example of someone who was like just being creative and being an artist and existing out in the world. And I think that really sort of inspired me to want to reconnect with my artistic practice, which, although I really enjoyed working a blue collar job and learning a trade, I think it was an incredibly important like character building chapter in my life. And I met a lot of great people and developed, I think, as a person a lot through that. I did realize after like half a decade that like, this isn't what I'm meant to be doing with my life. I don't think it's my path to wake up 10 years from now with a broken back and a lung full of concrete. You know, like I have a talent, I have something, I have a gift that I can share with the world through my creative practice. And like, I better get back to that before I lose, you know, touch with it. And I was really inspired by Aimee. And so that's when we bought a camera together. And at the same time as I was sort of reconnecting with that, I was also transitioning away from being a young person living in the city. I was skateboarding less. My friends were all skateboarding less. It's kind of that point in your mid-20s where like real life is setting in. People are starting families. They're getting jobs. The sort of like endless skateboarding summer from like 15 to 24 or whatever was drawing to a close. And I was reconnecting with fishing also, which through most of my college years, I just lived in a city. I didn't have a car. I wasn't going back to Montana in the summers. You know, I was kind of like fishing.
Was this in Providence when you were a Mason?
Yeah, yeah. And so so
the camera was a GH3 that you guys bought together.
That was the first, you know, outside of obviously I owned a VX1000.
We had we had like film cameras. You had a Super 8 camera. I had that stuff. But in terms of like
modern,
yeah.
HD
was that
digital.
Was the goal of that camera to make films for YouTube?
Yeah, just to make films in general. We were putting them on Vimeo at the time.
Vimeo, yeah.
Yeah, because you know, coming from film school, that was like you were weird to believe that Vimeo was like the only place you could upload stuff. It still kind of holds that esteem a little bit.
Vimeo's like back then was like what Flickr was for photographers.
Yeah,
and they're both still around. But they're more pure in the sense of like you're on this platform because you create an art form that you want a place to put it.
Yeah, the generation that we came from, there was no such thing as like creating films for the internet yet. You know, all the films that I had made, skateboard films at college, were all meant to be viewed in a small theater with live audiences. You know, like that was how you showed your work. It just sort of coincided with an era where like you could host things online. Like if you needed to have a portfolio, so you could make a website and people could, but no one was really like consuming work online in that way where you would be like, my goal is to make something to be consumed online. You know, it was just kind of like, we wanted to make stuff to make
people
stuff.
Were still subscribing to cable and watching traditional TV.
Right. And it was like, it was an option to be able to share it with basically like your friends and family. You could like put it up on Vimeo and like email people a link or whatever so they could watch it. It was right at that cusp where like that idea of like online consumption being like the actual point was starting to happen.
And I feel like
a couple of years.
Yeah, we would post to Vimeo, and like as things started to take off, like the Vimeo would get posted on a blog, like a fly fishing blog or something. People would see it that way. Like
it had to get viral somewhere else.
A little bit, but yeah, it wasn't. We didn't start at YouTube for a while, honestly.
Yeah, a couple of years. We
started. I feel like Vimeo felt like they sort of intentionally didn't pivot to social media to kind of keep this audience of creators that were making stuff intentionally not for YouTube. And I think maybe that's where YouTube kind of had this opportunity to slide in and like capture, you know, the audience that they've had. And also I felt like, because I had a Vimeo account too, and it got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm limited to how many minutes a month I can upload before I have to pay. Right, and YouTube being completely free, I think it part of that made it the reason why a lot of people like you guys and myself maybe switched. I'm going to upload my videos to this place where I didn't have to pay.
Paying for pro accounts, and then we were still getting to a point where we're going to max that out, and we're having to pay for all the storage, and then that was kind of like, do we start a YouTube? That way it can be on there. And then it was like, well, do we keep both of them? Like, do we keep the Vimeo catalog? Like, all these videos that like are not on YouTube were on Vimeo. Like, no one can ever see.
Are they still there? Are they still there?
No, so
or have you stopped paying for an account?
Yeah, it was like $300 or something crazy.
Well, yeah, so
expensive.
At one point, we made a film called Big Land that we sold with Vimeo on demand.
Yeah,
they have like a paywall service on demand.
Oh, cool.
Service there where people can
which they were really like, it was like the only way you could really
at the time. Yeah, it was one of the only ways to do it, and all things considered, whatever, it was a pretty good platform. They had like a whole ecosystem that anyway, it was good, but. And with that came like, whatever, like 2 terabyte a month, upload amount with the business account, etc. And we uploaded a lot of stuff while we had that account. But then eventually, that film wasn't making us any more money. And it's like, whatever it was, $500 a year or something to keep it up there. Crazy. So we were losing more money than we were making. So we're like, all right, we got to deactivate the pro account and drop down. And then they retroactively go and delete everything past your next allotted amount, your allowance once you so
we kind of like got pushed out of the Vimeo thing.
And basically we're at a point where we didn't want to pay for it at all. So we went to a basic account
and
they were
it
like,
so that you don't come back, which is kind of dumb. Because a lot of services like that, they'll say, oh no, we'll keep it, you just can't access it. And when you start paying again, you get access to it again. But I guess they have a business to run too. They can just store people's stuff wherever.
Yeah. And I mean, they're big files, but
anyway, when we started making videos, basically making skateboard videos was really about like documenting your young life. I mean, it was skateboard focused, but your whole life was skateboard focused. That's literally what you were doing every day, is just like going out and trying to do skateboard tricks. So it was kind of, self-documenting your experience. And by the time we were in our like early mid-20s, our life was fishing and traveling. So like that just replaced.
So you took that mentality, just migrated to fishing.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's similar to, I guess, like a bunch of my friends, and we grew up on the California coast and went to school in Santa Barbara, and there were skate films too, but more than that was surf films, right? So like surf films was a lot of the same way. Yeah. So it's gotten better, and I think maybe skateboarding has too, perhaps, but it goes from just pure action, like these guys catching wave after wave after wave, like synchronized to music, more storytelling. Like we went to school with Jack Johnson, who came from Hawaii as like a semi-pro surfer, and he played gigs around like our college, and then everyone knew him as like the pro surfer, not the musician. Right. So, and he also studied film, and then he made some surf movies after that. And I think that was kind of the era where these types of films became as much of like, movies you put on the background when you're having a party, as much as like storytelling. Like he came out with like September Sessions, I think, which is one of the first film where he like made music for. They eventually became the person that he is. But I think there's a transition period there. Maybe it coincided with a similar time frame for you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
When did you get Aimee into, like, timeline-wise? Like, how was that transit? Did you guys move to Montana from Rhode Island, or were you guys on the road after Rhode Island with the Westie?
Oh, it feels like such a distant memory.
Yeah, well, we had the Westie for 10 years, but we were only on the road with it for 4 of those full time.
Yeah, well, we decided, really? Okay. We had like talked about traveling, and I wanted to go out west. I had never been out west. I wanted to go to Montana. I wanted to go to Yellowstone. Chase had taught me how to fly fish, so like we had this like big trip that we were starting to plan. And I think Chase was kind of like, we got to get a vehicle, because like we both had tiny little hatchback Volkswagens. So like we weren't gonna like road trip in those, although Chase had done plenty of road
trips. You guys were Volkswagen people already.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, there's a loyalty thing. So Chase was like, we should get like a pickup truck and put a bed in the back, and I was like, yeah, but you seen these Volkswagen vans? Like,
it's not air cooled. The engine's in the front. Like, what's that all about?
It wasn't a tough sell, you know. Like we both started looking on Craigslist, trying to find local vans to go look at, and there weren't a ton of them. And like for us, you know, we bought ours for $6,000, and that was like a lot of money for us. Like we had been saving for months, and we pooled all of our money together, and like that was everything we had to buy that van. So we
and it was expensive, I'm sure, at the time, because it was like a 30-year-old vehicle for $6,000, which probably seemed ridiculous. We used to buying
like vehicles for like sub $1,000. Yeah, like $6,000 is like a lot. Yeah. But it was, you know, this great vehicle, and like of course we bought it, and it like broke down on the way home, and you know, like all kinds of crazy things were coming up, and we had to.
It's designed to do that, by the way.
Yeah, we had to take what we knew from working on our own Volkswagens, and then completely like kind of relearn it for the van, because the engine is so different, and like it's in the back and not in the front, and it's laid out totally differently.
You guys had newer Volkswagens, like Jettas.
I had a 96 and Chase had a 93.
Yeah, I had a 93 Cabriolet. You had a
96 Golf.
Okay.
So yeah, it was like a little bit of a learning curve with the van, but we started working on it, and like we would just take smaller trips. But the first big trip we took was to film Journey On, where we went out west, and that was my first time going out to Montana, going to Yellowstone and fishing, and then Chase proposed on that trip. So that was, you know, like a big milestone.
That was his master plan. Let's make a movie out of this.
Yeah. And so after that we came back and then just like continued to work on the van, and then I'm trying to think, did we do one more big trip for like 3 months in the summer, and that's where we filmed Notes from the Road, which was like more episodic series.
For basically like 3 or 4 years, we just did some.
We did long form trips and then worked on it on the off.
And then came back to Rhode Island, Massachusetts.
Yeah. We were living in an apartment that my parents owned, so like rent was very affordable. We had the bottom floor, we had a yard, I had chickens, I had gardens, like we had our whole thing going on. We would park the van in the yard in the winter and cover it up in the winter, and like we had our whole system. But yeah, that went on for like 3 or 4 years. And then I don't quite remember like how we got to a point of talking about moving into the van full time. But it came up and we started entertaining that idea. And I think it was more maybe my idea that I was pushing for a little bit, moving into the van. But like we were both on board and just figuring out what that looked like. And then my parents were like, hey, we're going to sell our house, which, you know, my parents lived in the same house since I was born. So at that point, it had been like 31 years or something in the same house. And they were ready to move. And they were going to move down to North Carolina. My brother was down there. So they were like, we're going to sell the house. And I think we're going to sell the apartment too. And just like liquidate the Massachusetts stuff and then move down south. So that at that point, it was like, well, I guess we're moving into the van. Like, for real.
Like, you didn't work out a deal with the new owner to keep the rent for me the same?
Yeah. Or, I mean, we entertained, like, do we move up to Maine? Like, we love Maine. Do we move somewhere else on the East Coast? But, like, you know, I have to pay, like, real rent prices if I move into someone else's building. Like, my parents were pretty easy on us with the rent. So that it made the decision to move into the van
So that you guys got a bit of a shove with that decision.
A little bit. It was like we were going that way, and then we just got a little nudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And it was like living in a Volkswagen Westie was also kind of a thing, right? So you weren't diving into something that was completely unheard of.
Yeah, we had seen so many other people.
It felt like that you could do it.
Yeah, Instagram, van life was like a thing, you know, like we were very aware of it at that point.
Is this like the
mid-2010s
ish?
This is probably 2016, 2017.
Well, yeah, I mean, we bought the van in late 2014, which was sort of like as van life.
As it was they were starting to go up in price.
Yeah, and then
you can pretty much figure out when by how much you paid for your van.
Exactly.
Right. Because if you pay 10 grand, you got it too late. You pay $6,000, you're a little before.
Yeah. Pay 26 grand. Yeah.
Yeah. We got the van in late 2014 and traveled a little bit and then moved hit the road full time in 2019.
Yeah. And I would say we probably were talking about full-time living starting in like late 2018. Like it wasn't like a long drawn out thing where we were like, we got to plan for this. We got to have X, Y, and Z. It was kind of like, maybe we should do this thing. Maybe we should consider it. Oh, like, okay, like how would we do this? Oh, actually, like we really have to do this. Like we have to move out of this apartment. Like, okay, we're going. It was kind of like a very quick transition.
So those couple of longer trips made it feel like that you could do this.
Yeah. And I mean, the biggest wild card was Levi, our cat, because when we would do those longer trips, I would leave him with my parents because they lived right around the block.
I see.
So
He
it was
didn't
very
come.
easy. Okay. My mom had cats of her own, so like, you know, and I grew up with cats, so like everyone was, it was very secure. I felt comfortable with that. We had someone to watch him and he was in a good place and had great care. So it made it easier to like go for 3 months at a time. But then when we started talking about living full time, it was like, well, I'm not giving up my time. Like I've already given up so much time with Levi. He was getting older. He was 10 or 11 when we moved into our van. So I just knew for me personally that like I wasn't really willing to compromise on that. And I told Chase on multiple occasions, if Levi does not adapt well to this, we're going to need to figure out a plan B. And it's not going to be leaving him behind. Like, we're going to have to, like, get an apartment. We're going to have to move out of the vehicle, whatever. Like, it's going to have to be what works for the cat. So you could tell, like, the mentality I was in at that point. I was very tired of leaving our cat behind. So, and luckily for us, it worked out great. And he adapted super quickly and was, super easy. So, you know, it was a win-win.
Was Levi, like, when we met Levi, he was mostly indoors. Was he an indoor cat mostly before?
Strictly indoors. Like never. Like I think he might have got outside once by accident. So yeah.
Because our black cat was that way too.
Yeah.
Our black cat came on the road with us when she was 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was exclusively indoors, and that made it way better.
Yeah, it made it easier.
It's actually the best way to have a cat is to make them an indoor cat.
Interested in going outside, but he was very kind of skittish, so he wasn't super into exploring. I mean, like he was getting more comfortable, but we had a good balance where like he wasn't going too far from the van. He would not walk on a leash, so like that was never going to happen. So like I had to figure out
ours was like that.
A good balance of him being able to go outside and not get too far away. Like he didn't go outside if I wasn't there supervising. A lot of that was me.
Yeah, sounds exactly like Yoda.
Like, we're really paranoid. Like I do not
being skittish and scared is like a survival. It's a survival instinct, right?
He would start to like wander off.
That's why they live that long.
The wind would blow and like hit him the wrong way, and he'd be like,
it's like
the noise would make, they'll jump back in. Yeah, exactly.
It worked great.
Exactly, and Yoda lived till she was 16 also.
Yeah.
You know, so I think, those are pretty good years, even though they were inside, but we had windows, and she was looking at beautiful views, just like I'm sure Levi was when you guys went to places.
Levi's been more places than a lot of people, and he's an international traveler now. He went to Mexico, and I think I was always worried that I was compromising his life experience in some way by not being in a house and having space for him to run around. But for 10 years he was in a house, and I think, you know, it was obvious to us that him, and every cat's different, I don't know, Levi's he was a very lovey cat. Like he really liked a lot of attention. I always would kind of joke that he was like almost more like a dog than a cat in some ways, but he really liked to be with us. So leaving him was really hard, and then coming back, like seeing what that transition was like, I think that he was so much happier just to be with his people all the time, that like when we moved into the van, it built an even more intimate relationship that I never could have imagined. Like the way that, like, I don't know, we all just coexisted together, and like we could tell when something was wrong, and like, I don't know, you just get so much closer, and you're in such a small space, and you really get to know the animal really well. And I think it was
and there's
really
far
special.
Less distractions when you
build like these special routines. It was cool. It was a really special thing to have, and very sad.
Well, I'm glad we got to spend some time with Levi in Mexico and being there when he was doing his international traveling.
Beach cat.
Are you guys Are you guys waiting a while to get another pet?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm still struggling a bit with the loss of Levi. This July will be a year. And that's still a void that feels pretty big right now. But I think for both of us, we know that we want to do more international travel. We're looking at Japan as a big trip, and we'd like to be there for at least 5 or 6 months. So knowing that we have some bigger things planned, I really want to just wait until I feel ready, Chase feels ready, and that we've got some bigger things under our belt, because like I don't want to have to take time away from whatever creature we get next.
As you guys know, traveling with pets is not impossible, but it's an added complication. So while we don't by default,
is a pain in my ass, but what are you gonna do?
Pros and cons.
Yeah. But it's gonna limit you in places that you can go to and things that you can do for sure.
Yeah.
So while you guys are in between, for sure take advantage of it, because we lost our cat in 2018, like the first day we got to Europe in 2018, and we had 2.5 glorious years without having to worry about what to do with our pet in the van when we go do something. But a cat from somewhere will find you inevitably when you're least expected, and when you didn't even know you're ready, you'll be ready.
It might be a Japanese cat.
Yeah, it'll be a Japanese cat maybe.
It has been talked about. You never know.
I never know.
But for people listening, the reason when we went into the van, the reason we came out to Montana, one, obviously, it makes sense that we've got like a family home base here with my family, but we could have easily also moved down south, where a family home base for Aimee was down south. But
we were ready to relocate.
Most people, I assume, listening to the freely roaming podcast have some idea of this fact. But in case you don't have an idea, public land and living nomadically is much more difficult on the East Coast than it is out west.
Right.
There's a huge amount of public.
Is that something that
available.
you guys, when you guys started full-time traveling in the van, did you kind of relocate your sort of semi-home base to Butte, where you guys are now?
Yeah.
Or is that just a place that you found convenient to come to while you were traveling?
No, we had planned it out.
Like you said, it's so much easier to do this.
Once I'm the logistics person in our relationship. Like, I do our taxes, I handle all the insurance and registration, all the businessy kind of paperwork stuff. So for me, I knew once we leave Massachusetts, we need to get established somewhere else. We need to get our residency. We're gonna need to register vehicles, whatever. And we could have just gone to North Carolina, but my parents at the time were also in between. They were in an apartment. And they were looking to buy a house, so they weren't really established yet. So it just made a lot more sense for us to go out to Montana. But I think both Chase and I were very ready to claim the West as our home base and to fully commit to that. I wanted to move, he wanted to move. We were just at that point, and the timing worked out well. But we were both ready to just make some changes and be established somewhere else and be on the Western side of the country, I think.
I mean, like you already said, you had wanted to move to San Francisco years before this, and just hadn't made it out there yet.
I was ready to make a big change.
But you guys knew though the convenience and how much better the West is for this kind of lifestyle before you made this commitment, right? Or is that something you found?
Yeah, because we had experienced it on those 3-month-long road trips when we'd come out for the summer. We had a pretty good taste of what that would be like. And then Chase's parents had moved here a couple of years before, his mom moved back into her childhood home to take care of his grandfather. So everything had kind of worked out well. And we had conversations with them about establishing residency in Montana with that address and that thing. So.
Yeah. And, of course, surprise, surprise, as, semi-broke artists living on the road, cost of living is a major concern. And while you certainly can camp full time on the East Coast, the majority of it's going to be paid, and you're basically at that point just trading in a different rent payment. So our problem of we had this cheap rent deal on the East Coast that evaporated wouldn't be solved by then having to spend $35 a night every night to camp somewhere on the East Coast, whereas camping is largely
for $35 every morning.
Right.
Cracker Barrel.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, we knew that was a major factor of like, we don't have a lot of money, and obviously we're moving into our friggin' car, like we don't have a lot of money, and we need to be able to do that in some way that we actually can like reap the benefits of not having a rent payment and having lower cost of living because we live in a vehicle. And that's really only realistic out west. I mean, maybe there's people who are like full-time van lifers out east.
Having spent so much time in the Northeast, like the cold of Montana winters don't bother you guys as much, I assume?
Different.
Or you can just leave.
Yeah, but like the amount of time we actually spend in Montana winters is pretty limited. I mean, obviously it's May now and it was snowing last week, so you never really know what you're going to get. Spring and fall in Montana can fluctuate quite a bit, but for the most part, we're free to just chase good weather, which is why we end up in places like Baja in the winter or in Arizona. The first when we got on the road, it was 2019. We went down to North Carolina, helped my parents move a bunch of their stuff, spent some time there, and then we drove cross country to move out to Montana and get set up in Montana in the van. And then from there, we immediately drove to Tucson. We had some work in Salt Lake.
We love
Tucson.
We love that whole area.
And then we just went straight to Tucson. So that was like our first place we went to when we had officially started living on the road. And then 2 months later, the pandemic started. So like real life.
So that's
living
why
on
you
the
guys
road
have
was very limited before pandemic.
You guys have a lot of this in common with all the people that kind of started this lifestyle around the same time. Do you think that kind of helps you guys like relate and bond? For example, I think when we first met Mac and Owen, and we asked them about how they knew you guys, and I think they were talking about how they had been semi-stalking you and then saw you guys in the parking lot or something.
Yes.
You guys remember it as that way?
Yeah, they came and found us in Tucson. Luckily, like our schedules all kind of like overlapped. Where like Peter and Shruti and Mac and Owen were coming from New Mexico into that area, and we were camping at a Walmart in Tucson, and they creepily showed up and like circled us in the parking lot and then like parked over there to like not be super creepy. It was pretty late at night, and like we had made a plan to meet in the morning, and we all got breakfast and like talked for hours and hours, and then we went out and did little hikes around town. But for sure, I mean, that was our first exposure, meeting them. But from there, like the pandemic started, we were all out doing our own thing. But Mac and Owen were with Carissa and Lindbergh, and then they ended up going back to Carissa and Lindbergh's house, like after they had met them, and they forged that friendship. And then we ended up in Bullhead City, but like Mac had been in touch with us being like, I think they're going to shut down the border in California. Like we were all just sort of scrambling, trying to figure out like, what are we going to do? But then we went and quarantined in Bullhead City. Chase's uncle had a vacant house there because he was stuck in Vancouver. He had two houses between Bullhead City and Vancouver. And he couldn't come down to the Arizona house. So he had us stay there. We quarantined for like 6 weeks. It was weird. It was like the Twilight Zone because there was
don't let the zombies in.
Cell service in the house. There was no internet. We had to like walk up a hill to get cell service, to like call our parents, be like, we're okay. So we were kind of in like a weird isolated bubble, and Chase and I would just go on like 4 walks a day looking for birds and like looking for roadrunners and filming roadrunners, and like our whole world like shrunk really small for that 6 weeks. And then when we came out of that, we made a plan to meet up with Mac and Owen again. They were leaving Carissa and Lindbergh's house. They brought Carissa and Lindbergh with them, and we all met up together. And that was sort of what started the summer of like traveling together, which really, I think, bonded us very closely because no one really had work to do because everything was shut down. So it was kind of like being on full summer vacation with all your friends, getting to know all of these people and like living together and traveling around.
You got some freedom back So you guys felt like you could go do stuff.
Yeah, sharing resources was super important. Mackinac had a 20-gallon water tank. We had a 4-gallon jug. So like bringing everyone's resources together was what made it possible for us to stay remote for so long when there was so much uncertainty with like what was going on in the world.
I would say, the first 6 months that we were on the road, we didn't meet anybody. And we
except for when we broke down and people helped us.
Right. We met people like that. We didn't meet any like
mechanics.
Nomads. We didn't meet anyone doing the same stuff we did, and I don't know that we ever would have because we're very introverted, very private people. We weren't seeking community when we got on the road. We were getting on the road for very like personal, personal experiences, and community wasn't really a factor in that. I don't think that fell in our lap during the pandemic, I think largely because, and we knew Mac and Owen.
Yeah, we had been in touch.
Online, Peter and Trudy, all these people, the internet is its own kind of community, but very rarely does the internet community actually become an IRL community. But the reason I think that happened was, one, nobody had anything to do. Pooling resources was valuable, but really I just think people were like, at least speaking from my personal experience, like scared and lonely during the pandemic, and being able to like you find people because already like living on the road in normal circumstances is kind of isolating and maybe a little lonely. But then when the world's falling apart, all of a sudden it becomes like really lonely and scary.
And you can't buy toilet paper, and you can't take a shower anywhere.
So I think just like creating a little local community like that of people just like gave us all a lot of comfort and kind of made life feel a little more normal, So I think, I don't want to say that like the pandemic's responsible for these close friendships we have now, but that sort of created this environment.
It gave us the time, to really
to be close and together. And like I think probably the reason we know you guys and are friends with you guys is probably because of that pandemic period and meeting Mac and Owen and Peter and Truthy.
Building those friendships.
Chris and Lindbergh, because otherwise, like, I don't know if we had never met them. Like, I don't think we'd go to expos. I don't think that we'd be like seeking out meet and greets with people, or we're the type of people who'd probably be like going out of our way not to see anybody else. You know what I mean? Because we're just
it's hard to say.
Shy and weird.
We are just kind of shy, introverted, not super social people. But also, the longer you live on the road and don't have that community, maybe we would change a little bit and you would start to seek it out. Because I think what became very clear to me from those experiences during the pandemic, from going to things like Expo, is that like the people and meeting those people and building that community is actually like one of the best parts of being on the road and building those relationships. So like you don't necessarily realize how much you might miss it or how much you might need it until you don't have it. So like maybe we would have eventually gotten there. And I think, as I said, like we were talking to Mac and Owen before, I would message them and ask advice about bringing a cat on the road because they were traveling with Luna, and like we would share a lot of information, and there was a lot of motivation to meet them because they were doing something that we looked up to them as like a guide of like how to get on the road, how to live in a van and things like that. So
but like in our
it's funny because that's our first interaction with them is they reached out to us about how to travel with a cat.
Yeah.
So you guys are the OG cat masters. That's the moral of the story.
I mean, I wouldn't say that, but it's like I think the nice thing about having this sort of Instagram groups and social media that it lets you kind of get to know somebody at maybe a surface level, or at least let you kind of get to know somebody in a way that they want to be perceived, right? Because then you don't really know, because they won't show the things that they don't like about themselves, I suppose.
Sure.
But at the same time, like you don't go into a new friendship completely blind and having to figure out, oh my gosh, we're total opposites. We hate each other, right? So at least they want to be perceived in the way that maybe you want to be perceived. Yeah, you have some commonality. And I would even say, like, I think it's totally true that an event like the COVID pandemic can bring people together. And in fact, probably a much stronger bond because of that. Because when we talk to people about the reasons why they start traveling in the first place, a lot of them started based on some kind of traumatic experience, like losing a pet or losing a family member or losing their house or losing their job, right? Kind of it's an impetus for them to get start like take a fork down the road. Having this kind of COVID pandemic happen with you guys was a reason that you guys were able to come together. And also, during those early days, it was really scary. Like, you didn't really want to just meet random people, spend a lot of time with them. And once you kind of found your safety group, you guys know where everybody's been. We're all, acting the same, behaving the same way in ways that we, felt as safe. Then it makes sense to stick together for that entire time. Right, because otherwise, finding some new people to hang out with was really scary. Yeah, in fact, I would even say that's one of the reasons why a couple years after the pandemic started, we came back, because we felt like there was added loneliness of traveling on the road. Like when we started watching Mac and Owen's videos, was actually during the pandemic, and they had just uploaded videos of them traveling with you guys.
Yeah.
Right, so we were watching videos of people going out with other people traveling together, and we're like, we used to do that, and we can't do that anymore. And even if we did do it, we have to do it with like British people and French people and Germans and Dutch and
they're not like that, Dan.
And it's great, but at the same time, like, we don't have as much in common, right? There's less commonality. We don't understand the same cultural references, and if we don't speak natively in the same language, we have to speak in very basic ways, so it was just overall challenging. So we came back in 22, and that's when we met you guys at the expo, so in a big roundabout way, it was like all the decisions that were made along the way got us to that same place at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it makes sense. An isolating event where everyone was forced to isolate, in the end, like, reminded everyone of the importance of community.
Yeah. As you guys are sort of moving forward with your travels and life on the road, I know you guys have announced and plan on spending your summer in Alaska, and you're leaving possibly tomorrow if you can get the rest 40% done. Is that the plan?
And I mean, the Alaska thing has been on the list for a long time. I think everyone sort of envisions, like, you got to go to Alaska, and like fishing and outdoor recreation. There's just so much to do and so much to see, photography. It's always been on the list of places we want to go, and things sort of fell in place this summer to be the summer to go make this happen. So we're going to leave Montana, hopefully go over into like Portland, Oregon area, come up the coast, go into Washington. And this is where the whole plan has like flip-flopped a bunch of times. That beginning part has always been the plan, but we initially were thinking we would take the ferry north up into Alaska. We'd leave out of Bellingham, take the ferry, arrive in Juneau, spend some time there, and then go into Haines, and then we would continue to drive up. And then in the end of August, beginning of September, we would have started driving south down through the Yukon, BC, Vancouver Island, and then come back into the States. We went to book our ferry tickets, and there were a bunch of changes that happened with the ferry because one of their boats is in repair, and they were anticipating it being available starting in May. That is not happening, so they had to scrap a bunch of the May and June ferry trips. Like, a bunch of people's trips got canceled. You couldn't be put on a wait list. I called them, completely panicked, thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? Like, this is not, like, our whole thing is ruined. And Chase quickly
You're ruining my life.
Down off the ledge, and we talked through some ideas and bounced ideas around, and we decided, let's flip-flop it. So we're going to go to Portland, go up into Washington, hopefully do Vancouver Island for a little bit, and then start driving north up through BC. We might cut over and do a little bit like Hyder, Stewart area of Alaska, and then continue north through the Yukon, drive up into Alaska, take the ferry south from Haines in September.
Okay. So you would take the Cassiar instead of the main way up.
I think we're going to take. Yeah, I think we'll take the Cassiar. I think.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked to a few different people. I think that appeals a little bit more to us. It's like everything's
for sure.
Scenic up there, but slightly more.
Yeah. Maybe it's a little bit more
farther, closer to the western side there. But Yeah, it's been a lot of ups and downs with the planning, but we're trying to keep everything very loose so that we don't feel too structured, because when things tend to go wrong, as they always do, it feels more hectic when you have a bunch of things lined up based around that one plan. So we're trying to keep it pretty loose. Big emphasis on birding and trying to be there at certain times.
Yay!
To get certain birds. I know Marlene appreciates this. Everyone hasn't realized yet, but Tight Loops is turning into a birding channel and not a fishing channel. Sorry.
Oh no, this is the big announcement.
That's what the word fly means, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll be a very bird-centric trip, and then there'll be a lot of fishing in there and photography. I have upgraded. I guess some people would also maybe not call it an upgrade, because I've gone like heavily into the film shooting side of things, where like this whole Alaska trip I am shooting medium format, but I also have added a 4x5 camera to my arsenal. I've never shot 4x5 before, so this is going to be a huge learning experience for me. Learning in the field, which I guess is the best way to do it, but a big film focus for me, hopefully, to create some sort of photo project on the back end of this trip.
Yeah, and there is a media component to this trip, but we'll have to talk about it off the record because there's no official announcement to make.
It's a little top secret, but we are filming a series.
Yeah.
All right.
Where that series will be, where we'll live.
Well, that's gonna be Tight Loops podcast episode 3.
Yeah, sorry. Also, we haven't even started talking about birds yet. It's been hours.
Yeah, okay, episode 4. It's gonna be we're gonna have a whole podcast mini series with you guys. So is that the majority of the new gear that you're bringing? Is the film cameras, or has there been other gear that you're adding that you mentioned at the beginning?
I did add the Fujifilm X106, the little.
Oh, you got one of those too.
I got one of those. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, the little.
Just because I still shoot with I don't have a mirrorless setup. I still shoot with a Canon 5D Mark IV, so it's a pretty big camera. And I do find that there's a lot of instances where I'm just like, I don't feel like lugging my camera around. Right. So then you don't take the digital camera, and then you don't end up taking any pictures. So I'm trying to bridge the gap there and have something a little bit smaller, easier, just throw in a bag, throw on my shoulder, take more candid photos that way. But then also a film camera on this shoulder and that Fujifilm on the other shoulder.
I think it's going to be just multiple cameras because of it.
Do
you think you'll be doing JPEGs, or you think you'll do RAWs on those?
I am still trying to figure that out. So I initially set up the Fujifilm to be RAW. I always shoot RAW on my Canon, and that won't change. But the Fujifilm with the film simulations, that's like totally new to me. Yeah. And I have been...
And the recipes that people do?
Figuring out these recipes and figuring out what I like. And like, it's nice to be able to really, to look through the camera and have it look like a film photo. Because obviously, like, trying to weave the two worlds there. And it's been really fun to learn about that camera. There's still just so much I need to learn in the menu, but I'm trying to decide about the JPEG and RAW thing. I'm kind of on the fence. It kind of seems like maybe the JPEG might be a nice option.
Yeah, I mean, I always assume that the JPEGs and the recipes and the simulation is like the primary draw, and besides the compact, point and shoot, like viewfinder aspect. But are you not able to shoot a JPEG recipe plus RAW? Do you have to choose?
I think that you might be able to. That's the stuff where like I've barely spent any time figuring that stuff out, but I know that like if you shoot, like right now I'm just shooting RAW, and then when you bring them into Lightroom, like you lose that, like it goes to a RAW.
Yeah, you lose all the ability to do the stuff.
To me it seems like, obviously it's great to have the option to have the RAW in case you wanted to further work with that, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like maybe you can shoot both, but I'll have to look into it. But the JPEG thing, also it's a 40 megapixel camera, so like it'll help cut down file size too, and like obviously we have a lot of things going on, so storage is always a consideration. So I have been contemplating the JPEG thing.
Yeah, and in terms of
I'm looking forward to
gear,
seeing photos from those.
Yeah,
me too.
In terms of video gear, we've upgraded, gotten some new gear. A lot of stuff is staying the same. We're using the A7S III. Still got our old FS700 with an external Shogun recorder as sort of like a cine camera. We're able to borrow from some friends an FX6 for the summer. So we've been on the fence for a long time if we want to buy an FX6.
You don't own an FX6 because you had the FX6 in Baja.
That was the FS700.
Right?
Yeah.
That was a 700. Okay.
We'll get to try out the FX6 for the summer and decide. It's like the FX6 is like the logical upgrade, sort of, from the FS700. It's basically, the FS700 is an FX6 from 13 years ago or whatever. It's part of that same like compact cinema line. It's evolved a lot since then. Yeah. It was some things that the FX6 still can't do that the FS700 can do because it was actually kind of a high-speed specialty camera for slow motion photography. It was kind of niche a little bit in that way.
Especially with like fish rising and things like that. It's been very important for our...
It had like cache record buffer and stuff like a decade before any of those other cameras had those kinds of functionalities.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because the FS700 is like...
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's like the best value in film. Digital filmmaking is what a lot of people say. You can get it for like $1,500. In fact, we talked to another friend just a couple days ago who just got one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we got ours, it was like $6,000.
Yeah, it was like it was the same as like an FX6 today. But I guess in that dollars then maybe a little bit more expensive. But it was that $5,000 to $10,000 range.
And we've absolutely abused it. It's gone swimming twice. Chase has taken it apart completely twice.
Yeah, down to the circuit boards and the ribbon cables. Yeah.
And it still works.
Still works. Wow.
But so yeah, we'll get to test out the FX6 this summer. See if it doesn't cost a gazillion dollars, but $6,000 is still a lot of money to us. We've been talking about we should get an FX6 for 2 years and never pulled the trigger because it's just so much money. I
bought film cameras instead.
Yeah. Now we get
priorities, Chase. We got priorities.
Now we'll get to at least test it out beforehand. It's kind of like renting it for a whole summer, except it's coming at no cost to us. So we'll decide at the end of the summer if that's actually a direction we want to go or not. And then
so we bring both cameras.
Yeah.
Or just the FX6?
Both cameras.
Okay, so that explains why you're having to reshuffle a lot of your gear.
A lot of what fits here, reconfiguring Pelican cases, we had to get some new lenses. Chase got a new wildlife lens for birds, for other wildlife.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Which one did you get?
Sigma 150 to 600.
Ooh, nice.
Nice.
Yeah. I've wanted that lens for a long time. I just wanted something with at least a 600 plus millimeter reach for a long time.
Yeah, because you had the 100 to 400, right?
Yeah,
I have that for my Canon. Yeah, and he has it.
Yeah, you have the Canon version, but you also have the Sony version.
No,
we just have an adapter, so Chase can adapt it.
Oh, I see. That's the same lens when you have it on that camera. It's just adapted.
So we have to share.
Yeah, so that was the big thing is we have to share. Natively,
this makes sense.
Natively on the Sony, I only had reach up to 200. Yeah. I just wanted a really long lens that didn't have to be pulled. If Aimee wants to be shooting photos of something and I want to be shooting video at the same time, we wanted to both have a long solution. And then on the the FS700 is a crop sensor, so that's a 900 millimeter.
Yeah, right.
Nice.
It's massive.
Yeah.
So
and then
wildlife footage galore.
Yeah. We almost got a doubler for it too to go 1800 millimeters.
We met a guy in Panama from Quebec.
Yeah, birding guy.
And he was, what was he shooting on, a Canon? I think
No, it was a Nikon, but he had two of the doublers, which I didn't realize we could put together.
There was a year,
Oh my god!
or maybe a couple of years in Nikon's teleconverter development where they allowed a second doubler or second teleconverter to be attached to another. And of course, you lost 4 stops of light when you do it.
I was gonna say, are you
But
shooting it
still, he was able to do it. Yeah, so he was able to do it, and he had a also like I think an 800 mil prime.
It was like a camouflage lens. And
so it was a crazy contraption he has set up. He's like, you can only buy this if it was built between this year and this year. It'll only work if you put them together that way. Because you know the teleconverters have like the little plastic piece that kind of stick out, so you wouldn't even be able to put it together otherwise.
Yeah, it was quite the scene.
So
that's crazy. Have you guys ever looked into
some people are really into it?
The Nikon Coolpix 1000 or
it's like this weird
P1000?
kind of box. It's a P1000, I think. It's got a crazy zoom. Like,
have you guys heard of this camera?
It's like really popular in the birding world. This is how we found out about it.
Okay.
People use it like instead
I know
of
people shoot Nikon a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if Marlene and I were the same person with combined
totally
our
crazy.
interests, then he would have heard about it.
So listen to this. It's a fixed lens. It's a Coolpix. It's not interchangeable. It's a super zoom lens. It goes from 50 to 3000 optical.
Yeah.
What?
Holy.
It's like,
wow.
And it costs like
Now I have to
$1,000.
Google this to see what it looks like.
yeah, you gotta check it out. It's not super expensive.
Okay.
But yeah, people use the zoom instead of binoculars to view birds because it's so crazy.
What do you have to do to keep the thing from just shaking nonstop at 3,000?
I think it has some internal stabilization. It's not a high-end sensor or processor inside of it. It's like pretty crummy video quality. It can't do any like serious high frame rates in 4K or anything like that.
Right. It's the Coolpix line, so that kind of tells you.
Yeah, that's
Right,
kind
exactly.
of
Where it belongs, right?
we're at here.
But because it costs only $1,000, a lot of people buy it as basically just like an insane telephoto solution.
Instead
it's like
of a
buying.
scope.
You can't buy a 3,000 millimeter lens for $1,000. You know, so like people buy it just for that.
No.
We met two guys on the road, these birders, who have recently had some notoriety on Instagram.
We'll send you their account.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
They've decided to spend a year as complete novice birders doing a big year. But anyway,
Seeing every bird they can.
but they had
one
the
year.
camera,
one,
and we were like, "What is that?" And we looked it up. Like,
So that's
it's
the
a
camera
known
to
thing.
take if you're going to do a big year is the Coolpix.
Yeah.
P1000.
Yeah, and it's the predecessor.
That sounds pretty cool because
it's a predecessor to the P900, which was a 2000.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Marlene. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. No, because I totally ditched my binoculars and I just use my zoom lens now because it's just like I get so much closer and I can take a photo of it even though it's a crappy photo and I can review it later. So
Well, because that's kind of
that
her.
Coolpix
That's her
ships to
technique,
Colombia.
that She's like, I'm not gonna sit here through a scope and try to get a good look at this thing for like half an hour when I could just do a quick picture and then move on to the next bird and figure all this stuff out later.
Yeah. And then
I feel like it's kind of cheating, but
No, I nerd out afterwards. I love downloading my photos afterwards and just like trying to figure it out. I'm like, okay, science mode.
I mean, like, so often Chase and I are like with the binoculars trying to take a picture with our phone because we like don't have our cameras with us or whatever.
Yeah.
You're trying to take a picture through the binoculars, like and just so you can like photo ID it or like have a reference to be like, oh, actually this is going on here, and it's so helpful to have a picture. But like, what lens are you
probably misidentify a bunch of birds.
Oh, I have the 100 to 400, but I have
We have a 1.4 teleconverter on the
So you get to
100 to 400.
Because sometimes I find my 1 to 4, like, it's good, but it's just not quite enough.
Yeah. And we have the A7 IV, so it's like 33 megapixels. So you can crop a little, but not a ton. It would be better if we had like the R5 or something. But there's always more things to buy, and we try to control ourselves.
Yeah, I was trying to. I bought a doubler for my 1 to 4 for this trip, but the was the autofocus that didn't work, and then there was something else. There was like a bunch of weird stuff happening where it felt like it wasn't gonna be what I needed it to be. I was so excited at the prospect of like a 2 to 800 though, but the autofocus was like it was.
Yeah, the DSLRs will not autofocus past f9, and it was like a minimum of f9.
Oh wow!
blur on that lens.
So that's a limitation of the DSLR. Like they can probably do it with the R5.
Yeah. Which I've been on the fence about upgrading for years now, because now the R5 is so old. They just announced the R1, like the flagship, like a couple days ago.
Yeah.
I feel so conflicted about what to do.
You would stay with Canon, you think?
I have actually been. I thought for this Alaska trip I was gonna upgrade to the GFX medium format through Fuji. That was my plan.
The 100.
It doesn't really help me with the wildlife side of things, because that's not really. It's not a very fast system. It's set up more for like studio shooting and commercial work. I love the idea of like the giant files and these incredible 102 megapixel images. I think in a perfect world I'd get the GFX and I'd get the R5. Both of those systems are not cheap though, and the R5, the one thing that sucks about the R5 is coming from the Mark IV is they switched all the glass to be RF and not EF.
Yeah, right.
So I would have to upgrade
EF lenses won't even
or get adapters and
Right, that's why I was thinking Canon kind of shot themselves in the foot by not making the lens mount. They could have made new EF lenses that are only for the mirrorless. That's still the EF mount and have both sets work. If they were worried about, the distance from the glass to the sensor. But I feel like now they're giving people an opportunity to switch, because if you have to get new glass anyways.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And like a big consideration when the R5 came out and I was debating switching, we were doing so many backcountry trips, and like we still have plans to do remote backcountry trips. So the size of the camera becomes a major factor. And upgrading to the R5 would make a smaller camera footprint, but the RF glass is beautiful, but it's very big. So it kind of was like a lateral move. Like if I'm going to upgrade to a mirrorless camera, I'm doing it to be smaller, but then I'm getting this glass that is bigger than the EF glass that I'm already shooting on. So it just made made me very unsure. So I just decided to hold off. And now it's 2024 and I'm still shooting on a DSLR. But to be fair, I mean, that camera still is more than adequate for what I need. We very carefully consider our gear upgrades. So I want to make sure it's the right move if we're going to invest that money.
Yeah.
And the landscape changes so quickly. I'm trying to be more open. The Fuji stuff seems really nice. I know Mac and Owen are really enjoying it. So I'm open. I still I love Canon though. So it is kind of hard to move away.
I think as a primary stills photographer, you get less benefits from mirrorless as you do a hybrid or a filmmaker. So I think maybe that's why your DSLR is still, adequate, except for the fact that it can't focus past f9. But
with a doubler, it's a bit of a problem.
That's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so instead of upgrading
gear,
to R5,
I know, but it's almost 3 hours, so we need to wrap
upgraded
it
to
up.
film cameras instead of digital. So that was I couldn't make a decision on the digital upgrade, so I just went for the film upgrade.
Right, the film ones you can commit to. The digital ones take a little bit more, little bit more thought. Okay, I mean, there's so many things that I want to talk to you guys about still. That's why I think a mini series later is more adequate, more appropriate. But we do kind of a series of questions at the end that are a little faster. I don't want to call them rapid fire because they take a little longer than just like a quick thing. But I guess we'll start with just the basic couple, which is from your past and present. Who do you look to that inspires your current work? Or your previous work, or just sort of, historically, who are the people that you look to for your sort of professional side of your life?
Well, I can give quick but more general answers. Growing up, I look to professional skateboard filmmakers as like a primary inspiration in my filmmaking practice. As an illustrator, loved, similar to what I'm still doing now, like encyclopedias, ID books, scientific illustration books, medical books, like that kind of stuff. Anything to do with like illustrating the natural world really inspired me. That's still true today. I think from a professional or like a lifestyle perspective, we look up to a lot of our peers, people like Matt and Owen, who got on the road before us and have been incredibly successful and forged a professional working life on the road. So look up to people like that. From a filmmaking perspective now, I think I draw, and maybe we draw, like a lot of our inspiration from outside of the zones that we're actually in. Like if I had to say like what's my favorite thing to watch, it's like BBC Earth, David Attenborough nature documentaries, more so than fishing documentaries. There's a couple, sort of peers of ours that I gain inspiration from in the fly fishing world. A guy named Rolf Nylander in Sweden is a big inspiration. Inspired by
also has like a skateboarding connection through his work too. There's a lot of similarities, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say probably. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I bet similarly, like our current contemporary peers are big inspiration. I'm sure people like Aiden, et cetera, photographers.
Aiden, who we have not personally met, but is friends with Matt Owen and Peter Struthi. Aiden Klemenko. He's a photographer who shoots both 35 medium format and large format. I've chatted with him a little bit as I entered into this large format journey, but his work is incredible. He's done a little bit of work with Nat Geo, and photography wise, like there's not a lot of people who I feel like I can look to and be like, oh, that's who like the photographer who I look up to. It's like always changing, and I would say now like the social media landscape too, and just exposure to so many people, it can be a lot to take in because you're constantly getting all this stuff pushed at you, but you find so many new photographers who are like on a similar level to you or like a little bit farther along in their career or maybe like just starting out, and it's just there's so much inspiration from all these different types of people from all over the world making photography. My grandfather, I would say, I always looked up to him in the sense of like working for myself and forging my own path. He started his own business when he was younger. He's a master gun engraver, like hammer and chisel gun engraving. And he made quite a name for himself. But I know that when I was younger, he was really the only person in my life that I could look to and see that like he struck out on his own, made his own thing and was successful at it and was like doing his own thing on his own. And that had a huge influence on me in terms of when I started to look at photography and what I could do on my own and like building a business and working for myself. That was a huge influence on me to have that reference.
And not to snub you guys, because you guys are also have been doing this for a decade and a half with a family and animals. Also a huge inspiration too. And just like how to forge a meaningful and somewhat normal, albeit unconventional life on the road. We're all, I'm sure you guys too, still figuring it out or whatever. But it's really cool to be able to look at people who have been doing it, triple as long as we have and have had success, however you deem success. You've got a beautiful, loving family and everyone's okay and still here. So like, that's inspiring.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I promise we were not doing this to try to fish for compliments.
Well, you got
definitely appreciate it. Okay, so I love those answers, and to hear that, like, we hear a lot from people who almost everybody would say like somebody in their family inspired them. So I feel like there's some kind of genetic continuation of it. It just so happens like all the people that we've talked to so far on the podcast have been really creative people. It wasn't a coincidence, I don't think, because and it wasn't intentional either. It just happens to be the people that we find interesting and want to talk to and be friends with. So I love the answers that you guys had for that. So the next one is, if the four of us were to start a business together, what kind of business would it be?
Sorry.
Wow. You
Okay, ready, go.
Like what kind of business would we start? Is
Yeah.
that the sorry?
Yeah.
Like, since I cut you off,
Yeah, if we're starting
my
a
mind
business.
automatically went in one direction. I feel like obviously it would have to do with birding, but it also could have to do with In-N-Out Burger. I don't know. I mean, like those are the two.
Oh.
Right. It would have to be some
Hopefully,
kind of,
hopefully
like,
not in the same product.
Yeah.
Bird-
Yeah.
It's not the new chicken sandwich at In-N-Out Burger.
The poultry line at In-N-Out. Okay.
Yeah, it would be like
yeah,
birding.
we're doing a double of endangered birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a birding guide service that's catered by In-N-Out, maybe. I don't know. I feel like maybe Dan
Yeah.
start like a separate In-N-Out based business, like some sort of fan
Yeah.
zine
A
or
food
something.
truck.
Oh.
Yeah. Right.
But I feel like probably in the birding, maybe in the birding world, maybe birding and like camera gear.
Well, obviously it's like birding photos.
Yeah.
Oh
birding,
no,
birding.
we're gonna find
Yeah.
all the cool pigs P1000s and then corner the market and jack the prices up.
Yeah. We have lots of options.
Oh,
clearly.
awesome! I love that.
All right.
Okay, so next one, if you could own 3 plots of land in different locations anywhere in the world, where would they be? 3 different places, and what would you do with them?
Well, I feel like you guys are obviously very well traveled and very well internationally traveled. I have not been that many places. When we went to Patagonia 2 years ago, that was my first like true international trip aside from Mexico and Canada. I would say though that like the first 2 that come to mind, maybe there's like one definite for me. I would love to have land in Maine, on the coast of Maine. It's something that Chase and I have been talking about for years. And I think when we moved into the van, the idea was we were going to save a bunch of money, and then in a couple of years we'd buy land, maybe in Montana, maybe in Maine, maybe both. It'd be nice to be able to jump between the 2 and just build small houses on them. Chase and I both have very strong desires to build our own house one day. But as far as like a third
Have you
location,
made of bricks,
like Montana,
right, Chase?
Montana's kind of out of the question for the most part now because with the pandemic, like we've just kind of been priced out. So I think Chase and I have really been searching as to like what that place would be, and we've been looking a lot in Arizona and like the Tucson area as like a, not a full-time home, but an occasional. It would work great for us on the road. Like be there in the winter, get on the road in the summer. But
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I figured the question started with 3, because we know, just like anybody who's traveled, followed the seasons, is like there's no one place that you can be year round.
Yeah.
You're gonna run into some kind of problems.
And I feel like
weather-wise.
third, I mean, tempted by Japan, but I haven't been there yet. So I feel like that's kind of like cheating. Like I don't know for sure. But I love the coast of California as well. We've talked about Alaska, but haven't been to Alaska yet. Like, what would you say?
Well, if I was just to say to branch out from the Americas.
Yeah,
although
I'm very limited. That's
it could still be in the Americas, but at least North America, something closer to the tropics might just be, so much of the places that we're interested in being are environmentally interesting to us, ecologically interesting to us. So to get away from the sort of like northern hemisphere, boreal forest, Rocky Mountains, something tropical or maybe even subtropical with like a full year growing season and lush diversity of plants.
Yeah.
Different birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot more color.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and the second part of that is, like, what would you build on them? Do you have any?
So I think Maine for sure would be like a little house, little cabin-y house. Not like log cabin style, but like I have a very specific vision in terms, like I'm very into architecture and homes and house things. So I've like been thinking about this like the way people think about their wedding day. Like I've been thinking about what kind of house I would build for like 20 years. So I think a little cabin house, like in my mind, it's like on the coast, but set back a little bit with the rocky coastline in Maine, and it's just picture perfect, but also somewhat unattainable for us now. And then Tucson area, like in the desert, I think there's a lot of appeal with like a little adobe house. I mean, I think obviously as time progresses, like looking at efficiency with building is really important too, and like blending into the landscape, but also being efficient in the landscape with heat and cooling and environmental factors is appealing to me and interesting.
Yeah, I think no matter where we build, like necessities would be like a small, comfortable living space, a large, well-lit studio space for
always
creative
think about a studio
work. And then
garage.
maybe like a sauna and area for like, you know, cold plunge and hot tub and that kind of stuff, self-care stuff.
I also have dreams of like rally cars and old Volkswagens, so we've talked about a garage being on the list
Big
too.
garage.
Big garage.
Like work on vehicles, and we never really had a lot of space to do that kind of stuff, which I would just like, we need to buy a piece of land, build a garage first so we can store vehicles and store gear. That's really what we need to build first.
Yeah.
Because
we've actually been talking about building a garage ourselves.
Yeah.
Like a garage you can drive, rig into, and then live in the...
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a barn dominium. So last one, maybe you guys are already in this rig, but if you could choose any rig to overland travel with, what would it be? Would it be what you have? I mean, this is like, sky's the limit.
Being creative people, we are very aesthetically driven, typically to a fault, as you saw with the Volkswagen van. I still think there is like a major drawback to that van and that body style and the space in the van. I also I just love older vehicles. So like some of the older Land Cruisers and the Troopies, and like trying to find a good blend. Like the Maltec stuff is really cool to us, and it looks really cool. It just really depends on if it's like a full-time thing or a part-time thing. Because full-time has so many different requirements for us for comfort than part-time, where like you can really be a little bit more invested in what it looks like.
The idea of this rig would be more of a long-term excursions, right? Like multi-year traveling.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know.
Somewhere in between, I guess.
Yeah.
I will say, like, we're very happy with what we ended up with the four-wheel camper and the Tundra. Obviously, there's like things that come up that you would like to fix or wish were done differently, or whatever. You find like limitations, but overall, like, it's a very comfortable space for us. And I don't know, like, we like being kind of small. I don't know that I'd want to go really big.
No, I mean there's limitations either way, right? You either have more space inside, or you can't go anywhere, or you have less space inside, you can go to more places. So I think,
it's really hard
I guess the point of the question is like, your mindset of the type of traveling you want to do.
Yeah, I think for sure, like, the reason we ended up where we're at now is because we wanted to go more places. So for the time being, this seems like, the ultimate rig to us. But again, in the grand scheme of things, we're green compared to you guys. It's only our second vehicle we've traveled in, so that answer might change a couple years down the road if we end up switching to a different platform. But for now, I mean, the idea, again, because money's always so tight with us, any of these decisions come with like months and months of agony and research and thinking about it. So like, hopefully what we're in right now, like, is that answer. Like, it is the ultimate rig. We chose like the ultimate thing for us.
Right.
We couldn't afford to mess around and get something that we weren't happy with.
But if like money wasn't an option and it wasn't like full-time, I just have like a bunch of really cute old vehicles. And like put a little like weird. Oh, actually, I will say one thing that we entertained before the four-wheel camper and the Tundra, when we had just met you guys, we were at Expo, we were kind of already past this point, but the first thing that we did consider when switching from the van was like an old Chinook and building out fully, like stripping and rebuilding the interior of a Chinook. I love the way that those trucks look. They're very cute and funky and cool.
Yeah, Chinook's
like,
Tigers.
Small truck with the built-in camper.
The Tigers.
Yeah.
So maybe someone.
How quickly did Mac and Owen talk you out of that based on their experience?
Well, it didn't even, I don't even know if it was like mentioned to them, but it was pretty obvious to us when we started looking into that it would be a lateral move from the van. Like, if we're gonna do this, we have to buy a newer vehicle. We can't just buy another thing that's gonna like take all of our time to work on.
Yeah, because honestly, if you're gonna choose like the thing that takes all your time to work on, like nothing's better than the Westie already. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, what you guys ended up with is sort of a modern version of a Chinook.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, which
trying to like get as close
gets
to
you
that
the reliability.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That's it.
Yeah.
That's our last question, and
goodbye.
I know this is probably longer than you guys thought this would last. It's probably
Honestly,
our longest one, but I just love talking to you guys. So this has been
awesome. It was fun learning more about you guys.
I know. I felt like that we had to skip so many thoughts I had in my head.
We had more questions, but we had to skip over for another day.
We're gonna have to do this more
You
often.
can't see this, but Marlene's constantly like kicking me in the leg, telling me I'm talking too much.
We are notoriously like, we're quiet people and we're like very introverted and to ourselves, but then when we actually are in a social situation where we can talk about stuff, like, good luck. Like, we can talk and talk.
Oh my god, no. I totally get
sorry.
that.
We should have warned you.
Marlene's super introverted, and I find that introverted people are actually the best people to have like one-on-one conversations with, because they have so much to say and they don't say it to a lot of people, and once they get comfortable talking to you, they'll say everything to you. And in fact, we have a friend that we've been friends with for a long time. She also full-time travels, and they just actually arrived in the South Pacific in their sailboat last night.
Wow.
And when we were in Baja, she was sailing with her then boyfriend, now husband, in Baja. So we met them down. They brought their dinghy in, and then we went out to their boat. And she's super introverted. Like, if you meet her, she's way more introverted than anybody I know. And we met this older guy who's been chatting with her on a Facebook group as well. And it's like this 80-year-old guy who's in a camper. And I told him, Carrie is super introverted. She's nothing like the person you think you know from this Facebook group. Because on this group, she's like opinionated. She talks a lot. She's constantly on it, just writing everything and anything. So he was completely shocked. And when he first met her, he was like, "You're right. I've never seen anything like this." But that's why like, it's often the best conversation you can have.
Yeah. There's not a lot of like fluff, I guess. It's like real conversations about stuff in your life going on. There's not a lot of it's not a small talk thing. Introverts and small talk is like not good.
Yeah.
Not our favorite.
And I think, the funniest thing that I think Marlene told me this, maybe like a couple weeks or a couple months after we first met you guys. Oh no, after the last expo.
What are you gonna say?
This past summer when we saw you guys. It was like every time we go to an expo, it's like so overwhelming and so many people and there's so much like social interaction. Marlene's uncomfortable, and then she knows like, all the introverts kind of feel the same way. And then she's like, I feel so much better when Chase came over to me and said, "How you doing?" As in, like, are you handling this situation as poorly as I am?
Yeah, I appreciated that, because I was like, I need to go hide somewhere. I'm just gonna go take a nap. I don't know. Bye.
Yeah.
It gets a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. So thank you guys for being on this podcast. We love talking to you guys as always.
To see you guys and chat with you, and it's so strange. Like, I think it's easy for us to always feel like all of our friends are just kind of like, we're all orbiting around and we're gonna cross paths again. And I know you're so far away. We have so much time between the next time we're probably gonna see you, but it's been really nice to be able to see you through the screen and talk and catch up.
And I don't even think that we've ever had like one-on-one conversations with you guys without other people around. So this has been really special.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
We have to do it again.
So thank you.
Yeah.
We'll do it again.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Have fun. Tell everyone and the kids that we say hello.
And that was the conclusion episode of our interview with Chase and Aimee of Tight Loops.
It's our first two-parter, I think.
Yeah, we just kept talking.
Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoy that. And if you listen through all 3 hours of our conversation that we're sharing here, you would probably agree with us that they're very cool and interesting people. And there's so much more to learn. And this is our first time, as we said in the episode, first time that we got to kind of sit down with them, like just the two of us and the two of them.
Yeah.
Because usually we're with them in a group.
Yeah.
And we got to know them sort of in those settings, but in this conversation we had, and then the subsequent hour and a half, 2 hours that we continued talking to them about, we got to know them a lot better. And you know, we hope to see them when we get back into the U.S. next year. And if you guys didn't know, we're in a new country. This is Ecuador. So we just came into Ecuador 2 days ago. I think this is our third day in Ecuador. So we're making our way south, and by the time we get to the bottom, we will start planning our way back to the U.S. and we should be back in North America sometime spring of 2025.
Yeah.
And we'll hopefully get to see a lot more of our friends. We'll bring a lot more of them onto this podcast platform. Hopefully, some of them in person.
Yeah, that'd be really nice.
So,
but thank you, Chase and Aimee, for sitting down and giving us your time.
Yeah, they're self-proclaimed introverts, but you probably wouldn't have noticed that they were in this conversation. Which I think for people that follow them and for people that admire what they do and appreciate what they do, I hope you found this very interesting because this is stuff that you probably wouldn't have known otherwise. So, as always, thank you guys for listening and watching our podcast, and stay tuned for more. We'll have another episode coming up. We have one interview already recorded that we have to edit. That's going to be a really cool one, and also we have 2 other that are with people committed and scheduled, but we haven't recorded those yet. But those are going to be a little different. So I'm going to tease you with a couple of episodes that are going to be slightly different, but I think you guys will find them very cool and interesting. So is that a good tease? I think that's not.
I don't even know what you're talking about, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Okay.
She knows. So, well, that's it. That is our 2-part series with Tight Loops. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Bye.